I really want to query the policing of standards on commercial radio when a segment, now I've written about this in the Herald Sun, it's up online now, in the paper tomorrow. I really can't understand how this would be allowed to go to air. I'm talking about a demeaning and disgusting, and not surprisingly, this segment was fronted by Kyle Sandilands and his on-air partner, Jackie Henderson, on the KISS network around the country. Now, the segment involved, now apologies for talking about this on a Friday at 17 minutes past 6. The segment involved taping staff members, female staff members, in a urinal, playing it on air and trying to guess who was who. The segment I heard was on 5 females, apparently the week before it was men. Now, as I said, in print, you can imagine the outcry if this happened in any other workplace in the country. Female Labor politicians would be in revolt. So what did they say about this disgraceful muck? Where was the Communications Minister, for example, Michelle Rowland, the mother of 2 daughters, or the female executives of the radio network ARN that put this stuff to air, or ACMA, the government body that is supposed to oversee commercial media on free-to-air? Crickets. KISS FM sacked their local announcing team of Jason Lauren to make way in Melbourne for Kyle and Jackie O after they signed a reported $200 million 10-year deal to remain at ARN. But the move has backfired. Jason Lauren, poached by rival Nova, are now the #1 FM breakfast show in Melbourne, while Kyle and Jackie O have barely moved the dial. For more, I'm joined by media writer for The Australian, Sophie Elsworth. Sophie, great to see you again. I want to get into the utter grubbiness of that in a minute, but firstly, how does this happen? How does this go to air and there's no complaint, there's no outcry?
Because really, Steve, the ACMA, the media regulator, is very weak. They don't do a lot. So these commercial radio networks who are dabbling in very big paychecks for these prominent stars get away with whatever they want. Now, when reading your column today, just the shock to understand they think this is acceptable to put this to air. But where are all the media
outlets? Where's the outrage?
Where is the outrage? There is no outrage. It's disgraceful, Steve, and it warrants a real crackdown on what content is going on air. Now, remembering they air in Melbourne and in Sydney in that breakfast slot. They're on air when parents are driving their children to school. And is this something you want your children to hear? I doubt it.
So some producer or someone in there decides that this is a segment which will be funny. And 5 women who work on the program are asked to make an audio recording of themselves urinating in a bathroom. They then play this on air, and Kyle and another male, I don't know who he is, are then supposed to guess who is who when the audio's played. How is that even possibly within the guidelines of what is tasteful media or radio?
Well, it's not, Steve. But again, we go back to the media regulator. They are not a strong regulator. And often when radio stations push the boundaries, nothing really happens.
Well,
so
you broke the story about the 9 radio and people being on air and not disclosing their commercial contracts. What's ACMA done about that?
Nothing.
They had an inquiry. How long did that last? 12 months?
You had string of presenters. You had Ben Fordham, Jackie Felgate, Sophie Formica, spruiking items or having deals with outfits and not disclosing it. And all that happens is the media regulator says, that's not very good, do a little bit of training. So we've got a weak media regulator, and these commercial radio outlets, they are going for this really grubby sort of content. Now, it works in Sydney, Steve. Kyle and Jackie O are often the top rating show in the breakfast slot. They're, tight with Ben Fordham. Here, they've been here a few months now.
Well, 3 ratings periods.
3 ratings, I think 2 full ratings periods, and they're not making their mark. Their ratings is down around 6.1%. Now, in Sydney, it's around 14%.
Why the difference?
Because it's a different market here, Steve. You would know this better than anyone. The breakfast slot in Melbourne is dominated by Ross Stevenson, Russell Howcroft. They're up over 20% of the share.
Yep.
Every survey for years, as long as I can remember. So when you get these FM stations in Melbourne that are trying to do what works in Sydney, you can't just translate it across.
It doesn't work. The great news story out of this is KISS FM at the end of last year sacked a combination called Jason and Lauren, and they were out of a job. They got picked up by Nova, and guess what? They've gone over to Nova, and in the ratings that came out during the week, they're the #1 FM radio program in Melbourne.
Well, isn't that remarkable that they are beating Kyle and Jackie O, who there was so much hype around Kyle and Jackie O. ARN poured in so much money to promote them in Melbourne. There was all this hype. There were buses, there were placards, billboards. It hasn't worked. Now, Steve, I reserve my judgment completely. They haven't been here that long, but they're certainly not going the right way to pick up new listeners.